Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're looking at a pretty interesting commencement address given at West Point, class of 2025.
Right, and our source here is the transcript from the YouTube video of the speech itself.
And what makes this maybe a bit different is that it's for newly commissioned officers. They're not just graduating, they're stepping straight into, major responsibility.
Exactly. These speeches are meant to stick, to shape how they approach that service right from day one.
So our plan isn't just to give you the summary. We really want to dig in, pull out the key messages, the themes, maybe some of the more surprising bits.
Kind of a shortcut to understanding the core of it.
Yeah, what really stood out.
Yeah.
And it covers a lot of ground.
Oh, absolutely. Everything from, celebrating achievements to military strategy, global standing, even some personal advice thrown in.
Okay, so let's dive into the start. The speaker kicks off with a very distinct greeting. Hello, cadetsies.
Yeah, a bit informal maybe.
Yeah.
And then immediately calls the class of 2025 winners. Sets a tone right away.
A very positive, celebratory tone. He does the usual acknowledgments, Superintendent General Gulen, other officials.
Sure, standard stuff. But he adds that little bit about chatting with them backstage, which, personalizes it a touch.
And he makes a point to thank the faculty, the staff, and, importantly, the families.
Right, and that leads into that statistic about nearly a third of the class being children of veterans.
He has them stand up, too.
Mm-hmm.
That feels significant, highlighting that lineage of service. What's the impact of starting there, you think?
Well, it immediately frames it, doesn't it? It's not just their achievement, but part of this bigger family commitment, this ongoing tradition they're joining.
Then the focus shifts, quite strongly, to West Point itself. He calls it the most elite military academy in human history. Big words.
Very big words. And follows it by saying they're joining the greatest and most powerful army the world has ever known.
And then the claim that he rebuilt that army during his first term. What's the underlying message for these new officers there, beyond just praise?
It's about inheritance, I think. Inheriting this top-tier institution, this incredibly powerful force. And the rebuild part suggests maybe that they're starting their service at a peak moment, a time of renewed strength, high expectations, perhaps.
He acknowledges their tough time at West Point, calls it mission accomplished almost.
But then pivots immediately.
Right, says they can't rest on their laurels, they have to go for victory after victory. That's relentless.
It absolutely sets a high bar. The expectation is constant forward momentum, continuous success, overcoming challenges, a very dominance-focused mindset.
And to ground them in history, he brings up the icons Grant, Eisenhower, MacArthur, Patton, Schwarzkopf, connects them to the long gray line.
Evoking those names is powerful. It places these graduates in that lineage, suggests they're part of this story of great leadership and valor. It's aspirational.
Then he shifts gears a bit, highlighting specific achievements of this class. Academics first.
The 26 with the prestigious star wreath for top academic performance.
And the 4 Rhodes Scholars. 4. Tying a record from way back in 1959. That's pretty remarkable.
It really underscores the intellectual side of things, doesn't it? Shows they're not just physically tough, but academically very capable. It broadens the picture.
Okay, now for something a bit unexpected. He mentions 8 cadets designed their own hypersonic rocket.
Right, which, for listeners, are these super-fast missiles, a huge focus in military tech right now.
Exactly. But then he follows that with the claim that the U.S. had ours stolen by Russia under the Obama administration, but now we're building lots of them. That's quite an assertion to make there.
It is. It definitely injects a specific political narrative and a focus on technological competition, maybe implying past weakness now being fixed. Linking the cadets project to this wider context is notable.
Then on to the physical stuff. The grueling 18.5-mile march in the cold.
And Cadet Chris Verdugo breaking an international record during it. He even brought him up on stage.
That kind of public recognition really reinforces that value of pushing limits, physical endurance. It's a very tangible example of the demands.
And he lists the numbers for specialized schools. Aerosol, airborne.
And the Army Diver School, super elite. Only 8 graduates completed it.
And significantly, the first 2 women in West Point history to do so. Cadets Megan Cooper and Clara Saber.
That really is a milestone worth highlighting. Shows how things are changing.
Absolutely. Progress in some of the toughest, most demanding areas.
Then there's that quick moment, almost offhand, about pardoning cadets on restriction for minor stuff, giving them a clean slate.
It's a tradition, right? A symbolic fresh start as they move into their careers. A gesture of goodwill
From pardons to pigskins, sort of. He talks athletics next. Army lacrosse ranked #1.
Right, beating Navy twice in football recently, dominating Air Force. He clearly enjoys recounting the sport's wins.
And he singles out the quarterback. Cadet Bryson Day nicknames him Captain America.
Led the team to its best streak since 1949. That's impressive.
But the key point he makes is that Day chose infantry over maybe going pro. What's the emphasis there?
It perfectly fits that theme of service over self, right? Choosing duty, the military path, over potentially more fame or money. It reinforces the values he's championing.
And that leads right into his next point about choosing service generally. He contrasts it directly with Wall Street or Silicon Valley.
Yeah, saying they chose a life of service, which he frames as more honorable than stock auctions.
And throws in that anecdote about Middle Eastern leaders telling him the U.S. is hotter now than we've ever seen it. Says the country's doing well. How does that contrast work?
It's definitely setting up a value judgment. Military service as the higher calling, rooted in patriotism, not just profit. The hotter now comment adds a subjective personal validation to his assessment of the nation's standing.
Okay, moving into military priorities, America's global role. The goal? Make the nation as good or better than it ever was. Mentions the huge $1 trillion military budget.
It acknowledges the changing face of war, too, with drones.
But then he draws a sharp line, moving away from, quote, political leaders, directing our military intermissions and nation-building crusades.
Towards a much more direct mission.
Yeah, he defines the core mission as crushing America's adversaries, killing America's enemies, and defending our great American flag. It's very blunt language. And to dominate any foe and annihilate any threat.
It's a clear shift he's advocating for, away from interventions he sees as politically driven or open-ended towards, well, decisive, overwhelming force against defined enemies.
He follows that by claiming the U.S. military is currently respected more than any army anywhere in the world. It's hard to measure objectively, isn't it?
Extremely complex. Respect depends on so much capabilities, yes, but also alliances, how force is used, adherence to international law, diplomacy, public perception globally. It's not a simple metric.
Then focusing on national interest, border security, peace through strength, standard idea.
But then he makes claims about his previous term, no wars, no problems, greatest economy, sets a very specific picture of the past.
Describes a colossal buildup of the armed forces. Talks about building a Golden Dome missile defense shield. Big projects.
These points establish his narrative of his past performance, framing it as a period of peace and prosperity achieved through strength. It sets a benchmark.
And in a very strong statement.
Right.
The country was invaded for the last 4 years. He's talking about the border.
Right, and mentions deploying the military there. Claims illegal crossings dropped almost to zero, like 99.999% in just the last week and a half before the speech.
That's an incredibly specific and dramatic claim. And he links this to putting America first, ending trade ripoffs. What message does deploying the military to the border send these officers?
Well, it potentially broadens the scope of what they might be asked to do, right? Suggests military roles could include domestic security functions, depending on the situation, and, of course, the legal authority.
Switching gears to social, political issues within the military, he states that critical race theory or race gender for everybody, his terms won't be forced on troops anymore.
And takes a stand against men playing in women's sports.
And says promotions, appointments, will be based purely on merit.
These are clear signals about his stance on diversity, inclusion policies, equal opportunity within the military, reflects the specific ideological viewpoints.
Then he talks recruiting, contrasts what he calls shortfalls under the Biden administration with what he claims is now a brand new peacetime recruiting record. Says the Army's set to beat goals for the first time in 28 years.
Positive recruiting numbers are always a good sign for the military, generally speaking.
What do they usually indicate?
Often suggest public trust, interest in service is healthy, could reflect effective recruitment, maybe perceived opportunities, or even economic factors sometimes.
Okay, then he transitions into giving words of advice to the graduates. 7 points. First, do what you love. Passion is key. Uses generals who love their job as an example. Seems straightforward.
It's common advice, yeah. In a military setting, maybe it means finding that niche, that specialty you're genuinely passionate about, which could lead to, better performance and dedication.
Second, think big, like Eisenhower. Says big problems can be easier sometimes. Third, work hard. Using Gary Player, the golfer hard work makes you lucky.
Both pretty universal, right? Applicable anywhere. Thinking big fits strategy, leadership. Working hard is just fundamental to military life, the discipline required.
Fourth is interesting. Don't lose your momentum. Tells a story about a successful real estate guy who sold his company, lost his drive, and then things went bad.
The cautionary tale. It makes it that idea of momentum more concrete. Warns against complacency, basically. Keep pushing.
Fifth, have the courage to take risks and do things differently.
Yeah.
He brings up Eisenhower again, Billy Mitchell too. Notes how warfare is changing fast drones. Ukraine seems very relevant for them.
Absolutely. Encourages innovation, adaptability. Crucial for leaders today with technology and geopolitics shifting so quickly. Using historical figures who bucked convention reinforces it.
Sixth piece of advice. Never lose your faith in America and the American people. Here, he brings in his own experience facing investigations, more than Al Capone, he says, urges them to fight bad people. This feels more personal, maybe more political.
It definitely ties his personal story of facing adversity into a broader call for faith in the country, frames challenges as tests of resolve, urges vigilance against, well, what he defines as threats or bad people.
And the final, seventh point, hold on to your culture and your traditions. Says culture's destiny, emphasizes a culture of winning. How does that resonate in the military?
Military culture is huge. It's the shared values, the norms, the rituals that build cohesion, ensure people work together effectively. And emphasizing a culture of winning ties back to that results-oriented, competitive mindset we heard earlier.
Right, whose family has this incredible multi-generational history at West Point. Great-grandfather in WWI, grandfather WWII, parents graduated West Point.
And tragically, his father was killed in Afghanistan. And the speaker highlights the tradition of melting down rings from past grads, including Ricky's father's ring, to forge the rings for this class of 2025.
Wow, that just makes that whole long gray line concept incredibly real and personal, doesn't it?
It really does. A very poignant illustration of legacy, sacrifice, and the bonds within that community.
So getting to the end, in his closing, he calls the grads heroes, future leaders. Tells a story about foreign leaders celebrating WWII wins, but the U.S. not having a specific day.
Which led him, he says, to name holidays for both world wars, and then declares West Point won the war.
That's quite a statement. West Point won the war.
It's definitely rhetorical flair.
Yeah.
Amplifies West Point's historical importance, boosts pride by crediting its graduates for these monumental victories.
The speech ends with this really strong call. Never, ever, ever surrender. Never give up. He actually has the cadets raise their right hand and pledge it.
A very direct, very emphatic closing.
And finishes by mentioning he plans to deal with Russia and China and just keep winning. So the final note is pure determination, focus on global competition.
Yeah, it wraps up reinforcing all those core themes. Resilience, perseverance, unwavering commitment to American strength, and dominance on the world stage.
So pulling it all together, it's a speech that does a lot. Celebrates achievement, builds intense pride in the institution and the military itself.
Lays out a very specific, forceful vision for America's role, focused on strength, winning.
And offers this mix of pretty standard life advice alongside some more unconventional personalized points.
What really stands out, I think, is that consistently assertive, often boastful tone, plus the way he weaves in those personal stories and specific political takes, like the rocket theft claim or the Al Capone comparison. It makes it, if nothing else, memorable.
Yeah, definitely not your standard graduation platitudes. It gives you a really unique window into a particular view of leadership, military priorities, America's place in the world.
And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What are the potential long-term effects of this specific message hitting these officers right as they start their careers? What does it mean for the future?
A lot to chew on there.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the West Point address.